Maybe we just sit with that for a second. Because this isn't really a story about getting even. It's about the moment you realize the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones you needed protection from. I want to start there. Before the lawyers. Before the bank statements. Before my uncle stopped answering my calls. I want to start at the moment I knew something was wrong, because that moment was so quiet, so ordinary, that I almost missed it entirely. It was a Sunday afternoon in late October. My grandmother had just gotten out of a 3-week hospital stay. Nothing catastrophic. Her heart had been giving her trouble on and off for 2 years, and her doctor wanted her monitored. I'd driven 4 hours from Columbus to see her, and I walked into her house on Maple Creek Road carrying a bag of her favorite lemon cookies from that bakery she likes on 5th Street. She was sitting in her usual chair by the window. She looked thinner. She looked tired. But when she saw me, she smiled the way she always does, like I'd just handed her something she'd been waiting for all day. I sat with her for about an hour before my uncle came home. He's her youngest son. He'd been living with her since his divorce 3 years ago. Said he was helping her manage the house, running errands, handling her appointments. My mother, her oldest, lives out of state and had been leaning on him to keep things in order. Nobody questioned it. He was there. It made sense. When he walked in and saw me, he didn't say much. He said, "Hey," asked how the drive was, went to the kitchen, normal enough. But then my grandmother said something that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. She said, "Did you get what I sent you, sweetheart, for your birthday?" I told her yes. I thanked her for the card and the check for $50, and she went completely still, not sad, not confused, still. The way a person goes still when they're doing math in their head that isn't adding up. She said, $50. Not a question, just the words flat and slow. I told her yes, $50, that it was so thoughtful that she didn't have to do that. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked toward the kitchen where my uncle had just disappeared, and she didn't say anything else. I didn't think much of it in that moment. She was tired. She'd just come home from the hospital. I told myself she'd probably forgotten what she'd written on the check. I told myself a lot of things. I drove home that evening. I stopped for gas outside of Zanesville, and while I was standing there in the cold, I kept thinking about her face. That stillness. The way she'd looked toward the kitchen. I've known my grandmother my entire life. I know what her confused face looks like. That wasn't it. That was something else. I started slowly. I didn't want to believe I was going where I was going, so I told myself I was just checking, just making sure everything was fine, just being a good grandson. I called her the next morning, when I knew my uncle would be at work. I asked her how she was feeling. We talked about nothing for a few minutes, and then I asked her if she remembered what amount she put on my birthday check. There was a pause. She said, "I wrote it myself, sweetheart. It was $500. I didn't say anything for a second. She said, "Is that not what you received?" I told her I needed to double-check something and I'd call her back. I went and found the envelope. The card was in her handwriting. The check was from her account, and the amount, in her handwriting, clear as anything, said $50. So someone had gotten to that check between the time she wrote it and the time it reached me. Or she had written a different check entirely and the one I received was a replacement. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept running through the possibilities, trying to find the one that made sense, the one that didn't mean what I was afraid it meant. I couldn't find it. Over the next 2 weeks, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. I started noticing things I'd filed away as nothing, the way my uncle had become the sole point of contact for anything involving my grandmother's health. If I wanted to know about a doctor's appointment, I called him. The way he'd started giving me vague answers when I asked how she was managing financially. "She was fine," he'd say. "Everything's handled. You don't need to worry." I'd never thought to ask what handled meant. I called my mother. She's not easy to talk to. She and my grandmother have had a complicated relationship for years, and she tends to dismiss concerns about my uncle because she doesn't want the conflict. But I kept it simple. I just asked her if she'd looked at any of grandmother's accounts lately, if she had any sense of what was coming in and going out. She told me she hadn't looked in over a year. "My uncle handles all of that," she said. "He has her power of attorney." I asked her when that had happened. She said she thought it was maybe 2 years ago, around the time grandmother's memories started getting a little fuzzy. I asked if she had a copy of the document. She said she assumed my uncle did. That was the moment I understood that no one was watching, that the only person with eyes on my grandmother's finances was the person I was worried about. and that if something had been happening, it had been happening in the dark, quietly, for a long time. I want to say I moved fast. I didn't. I spent another week second-guessing myself, running the most charitable explanations over and over. Maybe my grandmother had written the wrong amount, and my uncle had corrected it to what she intended. Maybe the $500 she remembered was from a different occasion. Maybe I was constructing a conspiracy out of a tired old woman's misremembering. But I kept coming back to her face. That stillness. The way she looked toward the kitchen. So I called an elder law attorney. Not to file anything, not yet, just to understand what I was looking at. She explained the power of attorney situation to me. She told me that a POA granted to a family member is one of the most commonly abused legal documents in elder financial fraud cases. She told me the signs. Sudden isolation from other family members, changes to financial accounts without the elder's clear understanding, the designated person becoming the sole gatekeeper for all information. Every single one of those boxes was checked. She told me what I'd need to document before taking any action. Bank records, if I could get them. A statement from my grandmother, ideally witnessed. Any evidence of transactions that didn't align with her, known wishes, or normal spending patterns. She told me the most important thing I could do was get my grandmother talking, calmly, without alarming her, about what she thought her money was doing. I went back the following Saturday. My uncle was there when I arrived, but he had a contractor coming over to look at the gutters, so he was outside for most of the afternoon. I had about 90 minutes alone with my grandmother. I sat with her at the kitchen table and I asked her, as gently as I knew how, if she felt like she understood where her money was going. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that I think about every single day. She said, "I used to. I don't always anymore." She told me that the last time she'd looked at her own bank statement was probably 8 or 9 months ago, and that she hadn't been able to make sense of some of the transactions. She'd asked my uncle about a few of them, and he'd told her not to worry, that it was all things she'd approved, home repairs and medical costs, insurance. She said she trusted him. She said she trusted him. She said she was tired. She said it was easier to let him handle it. I asked her if she would be willing to look at a statement together. She said she would. What we found was not subtle. Over the 14 months since my uncle had taken power of attorney, there had been over $60,000 in transfers to an account my grandmother did not recognize. The home repairs she'd been told about totaled less than $4,000. There were transfers categorized as medical management fees that no actual medical provider had ever billed. There were withdrawals in amounts just below the federal reporting threshold, always just below, consistently, like someone who knew exactly where the line was. My grandmother looked at those pages for a long time. She didn't cry. She got that same still expression she'd had when I told her about the $50 check. Just doing the math, watching it refuse to add up. She said, "How long has this been going on?" I told her what the statements showed. 14 months at minimum. She closed her eyes. She sat like that for maybe 30 seconds. Then she said, "I want it stopped." I told her I would help her stop it. Here's something the attorney told me that I wrote down and kept on my phone. Institutions move fast only when you use the right language. Not emotional language. Legal language. Not "my uncle is stealing from my grandmother." The language is suspected elder financial abuse, potential POA misappropriation, request for account freeze pending investigation. When I called her bank the following Monday and used those exact words, I was transferred to their fraud and elder protection unit within 4 minutes. When I explained what the statement showed, the account manager told me they could flag the account and halt outgoing transfers while an investigation was opened. They asked if my grandmother could provide a verbal confirmation. I put her on the phone. She confirmed everything clearly and calmly. She told them she had not authorized the transfers. She told them she wanted the power of attorney reviewed. She told them she wanted her accounts back under her own control. They flagged everything that same day. My uncle came home that evening to find my grandmother and me still sitting at the kitchen table. He walked in, saw the papers spread out in front of us, and went very quiet. Not the stillness my grandmother had. A different kind. The kind that knows it's been found. He said he could explain everything. My grandmother said, "I know you think you can." She asked him to leave her home that night. He argued. He said the explanations would make sense if she just let him talk. She said she'd heard enough explanations that didn't match the numbers. She said she wanted him to leave. He left. What happened after that moved faster than I expected, partly because of how much documentation already existed. The bank's fraud unit forwarded their findings to the County Adult Protective Services Office. The attorney I consulted helped us file a formal report with the state. Because the total amount exceeded $50,000, it qualified as a felony under Ohio's elder abuse statutes. My uncle retained a lawyer within 48 hours, which told me everything I needed to know about whether he thought the explanations would actually hold up. His attorney contacted us about restitution within 2 weeks. The negotiation was handled by my grandmother's attorney, not by me. I want to be clear about that. I was there for my grandmother, not to run point on the legal side, but I know what the outcome looked like because she told me. He agreed to full restitution. Every dollar, paid back over a structured timeline with penalties. He surrendered the power of attorney. He entered a diversion program, which means no prison time, but a criminal record and 5 years of probation. And he is barred by court order from acting as any kind of financial decision maker for any vulnerable adult for the rest of his life. My mother flew in 2 weeks after everything came to a surface. She was shaken. She said she should have been paying attention. She was right. She should have been. And I told her that honestly because she needed to hear it and because my grandmother deserved that honesty more than she deserved my aunt's comfort. We've had harder conversations since. She's in a different relationship with my grandmother now, present in a way she wasn't before. I don't know if it's guilt or genuine change. Maybe it doesn't matter as long as it holds. My grandmother is doing better. She has a new attorney who was vetted by 3 separate sources and holds no personal relationship to our family. She has a financial advisor she meets with quarterly, who sends a summary of her accounts to both me and my mother simultaneously. She has a medical advocate who accompanies her to appointments. The systems around her are different now, and I want to be honest about something because I think it matters. There were weeks during all of this where I questioned myself, where I wondered if I was being paranoid, if I was making a problem out of nothing, if I would blow up a family over a misunderstanding. I almost talked myself out of making that first call to the attorney. I almost convinced myself the stillness on my grandmother's face was just tiredness and I was projecting. I think a lot of people stop there. Not because they don't care, but because caring and confronting are not the same thing. Caring is easy. Confronting is the part where you might be wrong. Confronting is the part where things get uncomfortable and relationships get complicated, and people accuse you of causing division in the family. Division in the family, as though the division had not already been made by the person taking money from an 81-year-old woman's account in increments designed to avoid detection. I didn't cause the division. I just turned the lights on so everyone could see where it had been all along. My grandmother called me last week. She'd been to the bakery on 5th Street. She said she bought the lemon cookies and sat by the window and had coffee and thought about nothing bad for a whole hour. She said it was the best Tuesday she'd had in a long time. I asked her how she was feeling. She said, like myself again. That's what this was actually about. Not the money, though the money mattered. Not the legal outcome, though accountability mattered. It was about an 81-year-old woman getting to feel like herself again. Getting to sit at her kitchen table and understand where her money's going. Getting to trust the people in her life because they've earned it, not because she's too tired to question it. If you are watching this and something in this story felt familiar, a parent, a grandparent, a number that didn't add up, a family member who became a little too essential, a little too present, a little too present, a little too reluctant to let anyone else get close, I want you to take that feeling seriously. The first call is the hardest one. Every call after that gets easier. Don't wait for the stillness on their face to turn into something else. Don't wait until there's nothing left to recover. The system does respond. When you know how to talk to it, when you come with documents and specific language and a clear account of what you found, it is not hopeless. It is not too late. And you are not causing the problem by naming it. You are just turning the lights on,